You ask nicely. You repeat yourself. You raise your voice. And somehow, your child digs in even harder. What if the problem isn't how you're asking, but the fact that you're asking at all? Researchers studying families in the Solomon Islands noticed something surprising. Kids help. They cooperate. They contribute. And adults almost never pressure them. In this video, I'll walk you through the one rule behind that, and why removing pressure can do more for cooperation than any command ever could. Researchers weren't looking for a parenting trick. They were studying how children in Solomon Islands communities learn responsibility, who cares for them, how work gets done, and how cooperation actually happens in daily life. What they found was striking. Caregiving isn't centered on one adult. It's shared across parents, relatives, older siblings, and neighbors. Children grow up surrounded by contribution. They see food being prepared, water being carried, younger kids being helped. And when researchers watched how adults responded to children, they rarely commanded, they rarely corrected. They almost never escalated when a child didn't help right away. Instead of telling children what to do, adults stated what was happening, what needed to be done, what the group was doing together. And somehow, without pressure, without threats, without rewards, children stepped in. But to understand why that works, we need to look at what most parents do instinctively, and why it so often backfires. Most parents rely on pressure because it feels necessary. You have somewhere to be. Dinner needs to get on the table. The mess is growing. So you ask, then you remind, then you repeat, then you escalate. Please help. I asked you already. Now, from the adult side, this feels reasonable, but from the child side, the message changes. Pressure turns help into a test, a demand, a moment where autonomy is on the line. And when children feel pushed, their nervous system shifts. They resist. They delay. They disengage. The Solomon Islands research highlights this contrast clearly. When cooperation is pulled through pressure, children protect their independence. But when contribution is part of the shared flow of life, there's nothing to push back against. No standoff. No countdown. No power struggle. That difference between pulling cooperation and leaving space for it is where the one rule begins to take shape. The one rule researchers kept seeing wasn't written down anywhere, but it showed up again and again in how adults interacted with children. They didn't rely on pressure to get cooperation. No repeated commands, no emotional escalation, no do it now moments. Instead, adults spoke to the situation, not to the child. The food is ready to be carried. The water needs to be brought back. It's time for everyone to head in. The message wasn't, you must. It was, this is what's happening. Children weren't singled out. They weren't watched. They weren't corrected in the moment. And because there was no pressure, there was no power struggle. Helping wasn't framed as obedience. It was framed as participation. That's the rule. Not never guide. Not never intervene. But don't pull cooperation with pressure, because the moment you pull, children instinctively push back. And once you see this rule clearly, the next question becomes obvious. If adults aren't telling children what to do, what actually moves kids to step in? What moves children isn't instruction. It's belonging. In the Solomon Islands communities, researchers observed, children are surrounded by shared activity from the beginning. They're near adults as work happens. They're near older children who already contribute. They're part of the rhythm of daily life. No one announces, "Now we teach responsibility." It's absorbed. Children see what needs doing. They see others stepping in. They see contribution as normal, not assigned. So when adults state a need, children already know the script. Helping isn't a favor. It's not a performance. It's how you belong. The research highlights this over and over. Responsibility isn't taught through correction. It's learned through participation. And because children aren't pressured, they don't have to defend their autonomy. They move toward the group, not away from it. That's why cooperation looks effortless. Not because children are more obedient, but because they don't experience helping as something imposed. And this raises a big question for parents watching. If cooperation grows from belonging, what happens when responsibility is isolated to just one adult and one child? When responsibility lives only between one adult and one child, pressure fills the gap. The adult becomes the manager. The child becomes the worker. Tasks turn into instructions. Instructions turn into reminders. Reminders turn into conflict. The Solomon Islands research shows a different setup. Responsibility doesn't sit on the child. It sits around the child. Multiple adults model contribution. Older children participate naturally. Work happens in the open. So when a child steps in, they're joining something already in motion. This matters for modern parents, because most families don't have that structure built in. But the insight still transfers. The more responsibility feels shared, the less it needs to be enforced. When children see you working alongside them, not directing from above, helping stops feeling like a demand. And when you state needs without targeting the child, you remove the pressure that triggers resistance. This doesn't mean giving up structure, it means changing the signal from "do this for me" to "this is what we're doing together." Once that signal changes, cooperation has room to grow without force. This doesn't mean you stop guiding your child. And it doesn't mean you wait endlessly while nothing gets done. What the research points to is a shift in how guidance shows up. Instead of directing the child, you speak to the moment. The groceries need to come inside. The table needs to be cleared. It's time to head out. You say it once, calmly, without watching for compliance. Then you begin. When adults act first, children don't feel tested. There's no audience, no pressure, no win or lose moment. The research shows that when pressure is removed, children often step in on their own terms. Not immediately, every time, but reliably over time. And that timing matters, because cooperation that comes from choice builds something different than cooperation that comes from force. It builds trust, trust that the child wants to help, trust that contribution belongs to them. And once that trust is established, parents don't have to work so hard to get cooperation. It starts to show up quietly, consistently, and without the emotional cost of constant pushing. That's the real takeaway from the Solomon Islands research. Not a trick, not a hack, but a different relationship to responsibility, one where pressure steps back and cooperation has space to move forward. If there's one thing this research makes clear, it's that cooperation isn't created in the moment. It's built across many small, ordinary interactions. Children learn how to help by watching how adults invite participation, or how they force it. When pressure leads, resistance follows. When belonging leads, cooperation grows. You don't need to recreate a communal village. You just need to notice the moments where pressure sneaks in and experiment with removing it. State the need. Begin the task. Leave space. If this helped you see cooperation differently, like and subscribe. And tell me in the comments, what's one moment this week where you're willing to try letting go of pressure and see what happens? Sometimes, the biggest shift for kids starts with what we stop doing. We stop.